the biggest misunderstanding in Tesla's competition. So hello, I'm Hayden Bluefield and welcome to the channel. So in this video I want to dive into what is the competition when it comes to Tesla. You hear a lot of ideas, stories and articles on mainstream media of coming competition, what it will do and how it will impact Tesla. But in this video I want to run through what that mistake is and what the real competition is for Tesla, how that competition needs to handle, what that competition is for and who will prevail as the winner. In addition to that, how we recognise Tesla as a company and what it's seen as in the mainstream media compared to what the behemoth, the $1 trillion company that is Tesla. You've got new releases coming from Auto Legacy, you've got Porsche coming out with electric models, VW introducing more, Hyundai, as well as many more. Pretty much every legacy auto company is now working on new EV models. They've either got them already or I've lost count of how many new vehicle releases are coming out in 2022. In addition to that, we've also got new players to the game. We've got Rivian, we've got Lucid. These, as well as others, coming out with various different models in EVs, whether it's pickup trucks or luxury sedans. But what is the world misunderstanding in the term of competition? Because this is something that I have with people when I talk about Tesla and mention I've ordered one, all this such thing, and people test driving other cars and other EVs and start to say about, oh, this has something better than Tesla, this has that, this has that. I mean, a lot of the time it does come down to aesthetics really, because fundamentally, in terms of the software, the technology that's inside, to have the drive chain, heating, cooling systems, the actual battery technology, in terms of achieving the range per kilowatt, it's just, there isn't anyone that's up with Tesla, whether it's yet, but Tesla is growing quicker than any other company. Anyway, the competition is not with Tesla and the competition is not with other EVs. The competition is with the Ice Age internal combustion engines. This is where we have the dawn of a new era. This is a paradigm shift where we are moving from a, what is it now, like 100-year-old industry of mass production of internal combustion engines, and we are now seeing the eradication. It may appear slow, however, when you look at the exponential growth opportunities and look at EV sales over the last few years, yes, we're only looking at, I think, 2 or 3% of global sales are now EVs. Why should the big legacy autos be concerned with 3% change in the market? Well, it's not. It's the case of look at that growth over the last few years and see how it's growing and how it's doubling, more than doubling in terms of year on year. And you only have to forecast that out for the next 10 years and realise, bugger, we're going to be gone if you are a legacy ICE auto manufacturer. In addition to that, it's when you take the Ice Age, so it's not just a case of like all these legacy autos that have been making ICE vehicles for so many years and decades, but the issue comes for all those involved in the Ice Age and the industry that is internal combustion engines. So think of your petrol stations, convenience foods, haulage for transporting fuel, dealerships, manufacturing, parts, all these different things that legacy auto has survived and thrived on. But not only that, the other industries. Imagine if we no longer have petrol stations, we no longer need to like pop in to grab fuel, and then you suddenly think of all the things you need to grab on the go. That's gone. We don't need it anymore. We have charging stations, we have home charging, and the only time there will be that convenience of charging, but it'll be a different experience, and it won't necessarily be about just popping in and fueling, because like when you think of stopping at the services, that's something that can survive and still thrive, because if you're on a long journey, you'll need to charge up for a time period, but it's not going to be something where you're going in for 5 minutes just to stick some fuel in as a single activity. It becomes the activity you do with others, unless you are on a motorway on a long journey where you are stopping and charging for like half hour, an hour, whatever, while you get some food, go to the toilet, etc., to then continue on with your journey. But the idea of popping to the fuel station to get some fuel, gone as a standalone activity. Fueling then becomes what just happens at home, or it's when you go and do your food shop, if you do your food shop, or while you're out in a town, drive to a location, park up, stick your vehicle on charge and leave it for the day on a slow charger, and then just pick up at the end of the day when you then drive home. So it's not something we're going to need anymore. We're not going to need petrol stations as the way we understand them. We're not going to need lorries hauling this fuel around. We're not going to need all this oil that's being taken from the ground. We won't need this process anymore. It won't be necessary. Petrol, diesel will be redundant. This is what the competition is. It's not a case of there's new EVs on the table and therefore there's new EVs on the table and therefore Tesla will be destroyed. No, it's a case of everyone's moving towards EVs, so ICE will be destroyed. And we'll see an industry where EVs will thrive together. When you think of buying or have done for the past like 100 years. It's not a case of, oh, there's only one car manufacturer. No, there's been an abundance of choice. And yes, we've seen different fluctuations in terms of market leaders and technology that's been available and how improvements have been made in terms of safety, tech, functionality, features and such. But in terms of moving forward into the new EV era, Tesla cannot maintain 100% of that market share, or the 90, whatever percentage it's got at the moment. I think it's around about 70%. Anyway, annualized vehicle sales for EVs goes from 2 million to 10 million to 100 million. Like, by the time you reach that point, if it's just this pie is getting so much bigger, and yeah, you'll start to see as other options become available on the market, you will just see that percentage become smaller and smaller, but it becomes a bigger pie. So therefore, there's no issue in that. That's not what the competition is. It's a huge misalignment in terms of understanding what the competition is for Tesla. But on the subject of like EVs competing with other EVs, one thing that is forgotten is, as a consumer, we'll often just look at the sticker price, look at the vehicle that's on offer, and just compare it based on that. So how much are you paying? What kind of range do you get? What features, what functionality, what are the aesthetics, and do they align with what you like? However, you don't buy a car and look at the balance sheet and look at the P&L reports of the company you're purchasing from. When you look into who is able to make an EV profitably, that's when the line starts to become thinner. So yes, there are a lot of options now for EVs. There are a lot of models, and especially in the new year, there are a lot of new models coming out. However, how many of those manufacturers are actually able to profit on the EVs they manufacture? And the issue we'll have there is, as the years go by and we transition, especially for legacy auto, this is where I see the big opportunity for those that have moved, or those startups that are 100% EVs, is they are working from the ground up on this technology and building their manufacturing processes and the infrastructure around EVs. Whereas legacy auto, yes, a lot of us will just, this is another issue that manifests, is that we look at it as a car, and it's like, doesn't matter what's powering it, the important part is the car. The car's not the important part, it's what's powering it. This isn't about vehicles, it's about ICE to EVs. And that is the core technology, and that is the core component. And that's what we're transitioning. So if you are a legacy auto and you've built your business around factories across the globe that manufacture and have a whole supply chain for engines, that's where you're screwed. And if you can't transition to EVs quick enough, you will find that the issue is you'll go bust. How long realistically can ICE vehicles sustain and be worthwhile? Because as a person now, like the conversations I have with people, even in a few short years, the conversations around having EVs and the offers that are available for a long time, it's just, oh, they're not going to be able to suit my lifestyle. I can't have an EV because of my requirements, because of the journeys I make and how often I drive. Whereas now the conversation isn't so much that, it's just around the cost, or the fact that they've got a vehicle that works perfectly fine, so there's no point them selling and changing over to an EV, especially from like an environmental standpoint of, well, I don't just want to buy a product unnecessarily and create waste of another product. I'd rather use the product I've got. But once you start seeing the mass adoption of EVs and the decline of ICE vehicles, that's when you start to see the issues in terms of availability of fuel, the cost of fuel, which we've seen massively over the last year, the price increases of fuel and the cost to run an engine just becoming ever more expensive, while EVs become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to run. It's now much more cheaper to run an EV, and the life cost of a vehicle, yes, there's the higher sticker price, but the running costs over the lifetime, it becomes much cheaper for an EV. And when you start to have problems with parts, repairs, replacements, then suddenly vehicles get written off just because they can't get parts to replace something, so the cost becomes too great. That's when the adoption becomes much greater, and people will then start to have more of an understanding of the infrastructure that's available. At the moment, I'd say a vast majority of people do not understand the advancements that have come along the last few years of the charging infrastructure for EVs. Like even with just my Nissan in the van with 150 mile range, I can still get around very easily and don't really have to have too much of a problem charging. Although with the Nissan, I do drive around with range anxiety, which is an issue you do have with a lower range vehicle. So there has been estimations and studies done on what range vehicles need to reach in order for people to be comfortable to transition, and that sort of ballpark figure sits around the 200 mark. Once a vehicle has got 200 miles of range, people are a lot more comfortable to transition, knowing that they've got that consistent and a good amount of miles to be able to drive without having to think about charging. But with below it, you just really haven't got that. And I see in my van just some journeys where you are just like sat there watching this dial just go down and down and down, and it does move quickly. But with the emerging technology of greater vehicles, and sort of picking up Tesla here because it is the one that is in the lead in terms of having 300-400 miles of range and being able to see it work so efficiently, and that when you see 300 miles of range, that's kind of what you can expect to get. Whereas with my Nissan, 150 miles of range can easily become a lot less than that. With Legacy Auto and other new car manufacturers moving towards EVs, we're seeing a lot more ranges that are working towards that 300 or plus. And even with the Lucid Air, we're now seeing a range being announced of greater than 500 miles. So there's huge transitions that are happening and becoming much more viable for people to transition to electric. But the biggest thing as well that is underestimated with Tesla is recognizing what the company is. And for the mass media, for a lot of people that don't study Tesla, they know Tesla as a car manufacturer. So when we talk about competition, it's Tesla's competition is other cars. But Tesla is not such a car. They are a car manufacturer, but that's part of what the business is. The business is software, technology, robotics. There's a lot of other industries within that. They're an insurance company. They're a solar manufacturer. They're a solar installer. They're in energy storage. They're in energy distribution. So there's so many different sectors they're in, but it's just recognized as a car manufacturer because that's the main component of the business. But what you're driving around in a Tesla is a robot with 4 wheels, and how many other companies are out offering robots on 4 wheels with that advancement in technology, with that functionality, with those features? It's unprecedented, and this is where we're seeing the lead and that others are struggling to catch up with, and that people are starting to introduce more and more of. But there's so many features that are within a Tesla, or they're putting the hardware in place for when the software catches up in order to facilitate the future of technology, where it will move, where we start to look towards and move towards autonomous driving and understanding how that will function and work. Which will be another video I'll dive into, is the competition around FSD and understanding who the competitors are for Tesla and if they really are, and how they're actually going after different things. So stay tuned for that. I hope it's been valuable for you. I hope it's opened your eyes a bit around Tesla, or maybe there's some points that you know of that I've missed. So by all means, please chuck them in the comments below and let me know. If you haven't already, if you do like these videos, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.